So I'm Jeff Soriano. I work at a company called Wing. Just about a month ago, we were called OfferPop. We did a complete rebrand of the company in 3 months. I cried a lot during that time. But it was huge, and I think it actually is aligned to this idea of account-based marketing. And when we were looking at the name of our company and who we were trying to sell to and all these different things, OfferPop just didn't sound like an enterprise-level name. So we said, okay, if we're going to sell into those companies, we need to be those companies. So we are now Wing. So if you guys see OfferPop in any part of the presentation, it's just because some of that collateral is old stuff. It's not from a different company. But as Sangram said, I've been doing this for a while. I've been doing and working for technology companies for a little over 12 years, mostly tech startups, and you can tell by the fact that I wear a skinny tie and jeans. So for me, what I've seen is that there's been a really big change in how things are going. And you know, it used to be all about this, right? And what's gotten really more challenging over time is the fact that it's really hard to reach these people. Email inboxes are completely inundated. Social feeds are saturated with sponsored posts. You know, the phone rings and we all just like, oh God, it's a salesperson. I don't want to talk to them. It's all these things that we're dealing with, and these are the challenges that we have. But our sales organizations still want us to deliver quantity and quality, and I don't think that's absurd to ask. But they also want that person to be a C-level, a VP, from a target account, from a named account, and they want them to hate all of your competitors and be in a buying cycle and ready to make your move. So what they're searching for is the unicorn, right? And this has become a cliche in marketing that we're all searching for the unicorn, but it's really, really, really true. This is what we're looking for. And so what I wanted to do today is mainly walk you guys through what our journey looked like and let you know some of the mistakes that we made so you guys don't make them. And if you're ever in a meeting where someone brings something up and says, oh, we should try this, feel free to say, no, Jeff failed horribly at that. We shouldn't do it. And when they say, who's Jeff, just say, it doesn't matter. He failed. Let's not do that. So for me, I want to share with you guys my journey. So it started one day when my boss turned to me and said, are we doing ABM? And quite frankly, I don't think he had any clue what that meant. But there was enough buzz around it that he knew he had to ask me that question. And while I knew what it was, I was still struggling with what do I do, where do I start, how do I achieve this? So the journey starts back in about August of 2015. It was a long journey, right? And so what we were doing was an exercise around our ideal customer profile and saying, okay, how do we get in front of these people? What do we do? And this ABM thing just kept coming up over and over and over again. So again, it became a strategic imperative that on October 1st of 2015, we launch our first ABM program. So I was like, okay. Started doing what we would all normally do, go into Salesforce, look at our target accounts. Do we have the right people? Where we're missing the people, let's do some gap analysis. You know, we thought we were really sophisticated using spreadsheets and pivot tables and all. We thought we were so cool. You know, meanwhile, I'm writing like these amazing emails. I mean, they had to be amazing. I was writing them. And, you know, but so we go there and we launch and, you know, we're like, okay, we're sitting, we're waiting, and nothing happens. Literally nothing happens. So sales looks at us and just goes, this account-based marketing thing doesn't seem to work. So I kind of held my head down and I went and I talked to one of my mentors and said, what did I do wrong? And she's like, well, you did 2 things wrong. The first was you guys went out and did your gap analysis and then you went to a vendor and said, okay, give me all of the people that you're missing and put them into the database and I'm going to send them emails. She's like, you got to remember that those kind of vendors, when you're doing any sort of like, you know, import through lists or whatever that is, that's not a lead source, that's a resource. And so we were putting people into the system that we knew we wanted to talk to, but it was essentially just a cold email. And that was the second point. It was just an email. I mean, I just said at the beginning, email inboxes are completely inundated. So why did I think that my email, even though I wrote the best subject line in email ever, why did I think that they were going to take time out of their day to prioritize my email? So she said, you need to go omni-channel. You need to think about this from an omni-channel perspective, and you need to think about it from, getting people to opt in versus cold. So that's when I started doing my research, and I was introduced to this concept of flipping my funnel. And I was having a conversation with a peer of mine, and he said, I think we need to think about two very different things. We need to think about this idea of account-based advertising, and we need to think about this idea of account-based marketing. So to give you a clear example of what that means, with account-based marketing, for example, I'm actually wearing socks right now from Insight Squared, if you guys know who Insight Squared is. They sent me a postcard, and on that postcard, there was a question. Why are you receiving this? Along with a pair of socks. And the answer was actually aligned to a business challenge that I had and their technology could solve. Now, they had already had me in the system, so I knew who Insight Squared was, and they sent me this stuff. And what interestingly happened is, as we were talking about their technology in more meetings, and we were trying to engage, and ultimately, like you see here, expand the amount of people we were talking to, what kept happening is people was like, well, what was that sock company? And Insight Squared kept coming up over and over again. So that was a really good example of an account-based marketing program. Whereas account-based advertising is, how do you go out and target these people that you want to talk to and get them to opt in? Because before I said I was doing these cold emails. And those emails were just that. They were cold, going in people's spam or trash, whatever. But by having people opt in and targeting them, specifically certain accounts, with the content I want to get in front of them, we were able to do account-based advertising. So what does that look like? It went back to, again, our ICP, so our ideal customer profile, and saying, okay, what do these accounts look like? And once we were able to very clearly define that, and a lot of people do this in different ways. Some people say, what technologies are they using? It can be geography, company size, job title, whatever it is, you define your ideal customer profile. But we started going back to the vendors that we work with and saying, hey, I don't just want people coming in who fit into these filtering criteria. I want people who are at these accounts. And we challenge the status quo of how you actually do buys, from whether it's a content syndication player like Madison Logic or LinkedIn, or we use a company called LeadSpace. And what's interesting about LeadSpace, by the way, is, and I'll make this point because I think it's important, just because you're doing ABM doesn't mean you throw out inbound marketing. They can live in harmony. They don't have to be enemies. So when we were doing any sort of advertising, as you guys know, and you've all probably done it, you see an ad, maybe on LinkedIn, you don't click on the ad, but you go to the website, right? You might bypass the advertisement and go directly to the company's website. So what we were doing is, when somebody, rather again than asking 15 questions on a form, when somebody filled out a form, we would actually send them through LeadSpace. LeadSpace was do a data append on things like annual revenue, employee size, industry, job title, job function, all these questions and things we want to know. And if they essentially met all these different criteria and they were part of our account list, they got flagged as being in our ICP and going into our ABM programs. So again, this idea that you don't have to give up inbound was important. And of course, we were using Terminus to then say, okay, let's say we do have somebody from Johnson & Johnson, because my company's selling at the big, giant CPG companies, right? And just because one brand is a customer doesn't mean every brand is a customer. So if we have those people in our database, we could use Terminus to do things like this whole point of expand, right? We needed to expand, and we needed to get in front of more people, because just because a brand manager knows who we are doesn't mean that their boss knows who we are. So that was really the whole point of going back and saying we need to take on this approach of account-based advertising and then layer it on top of account-based marketing. How do we expand our reach? Now again, I talked about this account gap analysis, and the way we did it originally was, for so many words, wrong, and we needed to change it. So this is exactly what we did. We went back and used these technologies to get people to opt in. We wanted to expand our reach within a company, but not just by importing a bunch of names. We wanted to do it by actually putting something valuable in front of them that got them to opt in. And this is a key thing, and quite honestly, I can't remember where I read it or who said it, but you can't ask for anything until you deliver value. You can't ask for somebody's email address unless the content you're creating delivers value. You can't ask somebody for 15 minutes of their time unless you're offering them value. So value is just a really important aspect of what marketing needs to be focused on. So that was kind of the big aha moment for us was, okay, this account-based advertising thing, and then how do we do account-based marketing? But what kept coming up over and over and over again was, okay, well, how do you scale this? Because I've heard account-based marketing has to be unbelievably personalized. It has to be unbelievably relevant. And we have a small team. Our budget's limited. We can't create that much content. So what I went is I said, okay, got it. That makes sense. So we need to figure out which accounts we want to go after. And it wasn't as simple as just going into Salesforce and running a report of what accounts are assigned to the reps, because quite frankly, I didn't see that as being valuable. So what we did is we built a model. Sorry, potential didn't scale well here, and talking about scalability on a slide where something didn't scale is quite ironic. So what we did is we built this model. And what it was meant to do was determine an engagement model. So what we did is we said potential, and as potential goes up, that increases personalization. So this was the model. If you fit into our ideal customer profile, again, we talked about this idea of companies that have annual revenues of $50 million or greater, and we're in these specific industries. We had primary industries, secondary industries, all these different things. What we did is we said, okay, if you're really high potential, essentially meaning, hey, you have, let's say you're a billion-dollar company with 30,000 employees, you're pretty high potential for us in the fact that you probably have hundreds of brands, and therefore we could make a lot of money selling into you guys. So we used this model to ultimately design what level of personalization and engagement we got with different accounts. So I'll walk you through what each of these kind of looks like. Start with no touch. There it is. There's the no touch engagement model. We didn't build a model for it. If somebody came in through our inbound and they were like, oh, this is really cool. Yeah, we'd be interested in buying this. Great, that's fantastic. We're not going to say no to you. I mean, we like making money, but we weren't necessarily designing programs specifically for this. You know, we used Marketo to do our lead nurturing, lead scoring, and prioritize that stuff, but we weren't going to go out of our way to spend a lot of time on it because you can't do everything, right? So you need to focus on what you can do and what's going to be effective. So once we said, okay, what does mid-touch and high-touch look like? We said we need to create a framework for this. I'm a lover of frameworks. I think they're absolutely fantastic because ultimately it gets everybody really aligned on what you're doing. So this is what our framework looked like. Somebody at my company said we should block some of this stuff out. I don't know why, but whatever. The point is, when you're doing this framework stuff, you need to first ask yourself at each stage of the buyer journey, and I don't think I'm blowing anybody's mind with this concept, what is the question that we're going to answer? And what is the approach we're going to take? What are the channels? What are the pieces of content that we need to actually create for that? And how are we going to measure success? So if we look at something like awareness, we would be going back and saying, okay, where are we getting the most referral traffic from? Are they the websites where we're doing some of our earned media or paid media that we know our target audience is actually reading? So for us, something like Adweek. If we were getting a lot of referral traffic from Adweek, that meant that our content was resonating with that group of people who fits into our ICP, and we make those purchases and choose those publications based on their demographics. Then you go to the demand generation aspect of it and top of funnel kind of stuff. You needed to go back and really think about, okay, of the leads we're putting into the system, how many of them fit into our ideal customer profile? And this was a big part of account-based advertising to really measure was how many people from an account were we able to actually get to opt in? So it wasn't just, oh, look, oh my God, we got a lead from Kimberly-Clark, that's amazing. It was, no, we got 15 leads from Kimberly-Clark. Something interesting is going on there. They have an interest. And I think most of you would agree that the buyer committee today is getting much larger. So for us to go back and say 15 people from Kimberly-Clark downloaded this piece of content. Hey, sales rep, you own this account. Now is the time to go reach out to these people, and don't be afraid to mention that. say, hey, Bill from that other department that you may or may not know also downloaded this. So it seems like there's some level of interest within your account as it relates to this topic. So the framework was really important. But on top of a framework, you have to have a plan that is some sort of cadence as to how you're going to do this, which was our playbook. Getting everybody to stick to the playbook can be a challenge, but this was really important for us because what we wanted to understand was what was the cadence that we could build and optimize that would ultimately drive the best leads for these accounts that we're going into. So this was really important for us as well, is what is the playbook? How are we going to do this? How are we going to optimize this? And again, this is kind of a framework. Love me a good framework. So then we go back to this idea that we were talking about content before, right? And content is a really big challenge, especially if you're trying to scale. So for mid-touch, what we went back and said is the level of personalization, if you guys remember that graph we put together, the more potential, the more personalized it is. We went back and said, okay, we're going to actually verticalize our content, and our outreach is going to be dynamic based on things like title or industry. And again, I don't think anybody's mind is blown right now, but it's a matter of going back and designing this in a specific way where you say to yourselves, how are we going to implement this? How does this align to our idea of this account-based advertising and account-based marketing? So sometimes it would be by industry, sometimes it would be by job title, sometimes the content was based on a challenge, writing content. You know, again, when we're talking to a retail company versus a CPG company, you know, retail might be interested in how they're going to drive conversions in social, where a CPG company might be interested in how am I driving loyalty or awareness for my brand in social. Same content, but the way you position it is very different because the vernacular needs to be different, right? So that was a big way that we took on this whole mid-touch kind of thing. Then there was high touch. And what was really important here is this is unbelievably personalized content. So if I was going to do this effectively, I needed to make sure that I worked with the sales team on this. So for example, the piece of content on the left was actually a real web page that we built for, it was Honda. Again, people at work told me to blank it out, but I'll give away the secret. It was Honda. And we went back during the summer, and we essentially said, there's people who take a lot of pride in their lawn, so let's build this social campaign around #MyPerfectLawn. We actually built the campaign for them and sent it to them and said, go and engage with this thing. So it was an actual working prototype of what our platform and our technology does, specifically created for those guys. And what we were able to see was that people at Honda were actually passing this around, right? Because I put Google Analytics on it, and I knew how many unique views it got. At the same time, people were actually using the hashtag at Honda. So we could see who was actually doing this. And then based on who actually did it through their Instagram channel, well, great, now we can remarket to them on Instagram. They just showed an intent. They just showed interest. So we were able to do this in a really relevant and personalized way. But again, this is not scalable. So you better make sure if you're building a program like this, it is for the accounts that have the most potential. And then the classic question, well, how the hell do you measure all of this? And for me, it was actually quite simple. We needed to go back and say, of all of the accounts that we actually closed business with, how many of them were in our ideal customer profile? And let's look at that before ABM, and let's look at it after ABM. And what we actually saw was we saw a pretty big increase in that now when we moved to this new program, 66% of the bookings actually came from those ICP accounts. And that was a really big revelation for the company to say, oh, this is interesting. If we actually talk to these companies about things they care about, we can actually get them to be interested in our product and ultimately buy from us. And the other metric that was really important for us was average order values. Because people saw value in the way we were talking to them and the things that we were delivering them, they actually were willing to pay us, you know, the full price that we were asking. There wasn't this huge discount thing to get them over the line because they were bought into what we were selling. So that's been like what my ABM journey has looked like. And the key takeaways here is that in addition to ABM, there is ABA. And you need to really think about how you're spending your marketing dollars and how you're doing it to be focused on this new level of targeting and being really laser focused on how your dollar is spent. So when you're generating those leads, it's based on accounts, not just, hey, we got a single lead from this company, let's go after that guy like we've never gone after somebody before and bombard him with 75 emails a minute and hope that he's now going to prioritize this stuff because he downloaded an ebook. The other part of it is ABM is extremely omni-channel. Like, just because you send an email doesn't mean someone's going to read it. But if they saw the email and then they see an advertisement on LinkedIn, or they see a banner ad, or they see something in their social feed, or anything that you can think of, if it's omni-channel, it's really more effective because you don't know which channel people prefer. There's no way for you guys to understand. And the last part of it is just around developing a model for potential and aligning those models to engagement models so you can actually scale this thing in a real world way rather than essentially being like, yep, let's go for it. So those are the kind of 3 key takeaways that I hope that you guys can get from my journey and what it's looked like. And again, the last kind of relevant thing to say is I started this in August of 2015, and it's just now that we're getting those results. And I know nobody likes to hear that it's going to take you over a year to get results, but it did take that long because we had a lot of lessons to learn along the way. So my point to you guys is if you can scrap out the 6 months of everything that I was doing wrong and take something from this presentation, I think you can actually expedite how quickly you get to results. So again, take all those lessons from what I did wrong, say, okay, let's not do that, let's focus on doing it this way, and I think you guys will see that you'll get to the end a lot more quickly. So, questions, if anybody has any questions, always open for that. Sam, are we going to do Mike?
Yeah, we definitely love to do questions. So let's give a huge round of applause for Jeff. I mean, that was fantastic. Yeah.